You are listening to this right now because, well, you build worlds.
Yeah.
You're a C-level executive, maybe a product architect or an operations leader, and you are currently engaged in this high-stakes, multi-billion-dollar battle for basically the most precious resource on the planet, right?
Yeah.
Human attention.
Yeah, absolutely. It is an outright war.
Right. But I want to start this deep dive with a slightly uncomfortable reality, one that might completely contradict the beautifully formatted reports your data science team just placed on your desk this morning.
Yeah, those glowing green dashboards.
Exactly. The uncomfortable truth is you are likely winning the battle for attention, but, and this is the critical part, you are structurally losing the war for loyalty.
Yeah.
So welcome to our exclusive deep dive. This is the first part of a really comprehensive strategic analysis we're calling the momentum engine.
And our explicit mission today is to execute a really rigorous, uncompromising breakdown of David M. Sterling's manuscript, The Affinity Ladder, Architecting Identity in the Age of Rented Engagement.
Yeah, and to set the stage for exactly what we're dealing with here, I want you, the listener, to visualize the cover art of this manuscript. It's this incredibly striking, almost, I don't know, dystopian visual.
It really is.
It's a human head, right? But it's constructed entirely out of cold industrial scaffolding and these glowing digital screens.
Which is just a profound visual metaphor for the precise architectural crisis we're navigating in the tech and media industry today. Yeah. I mean, we are just utterly obsessed with the scaffolding.
Exactly. We are aggressively, obsessively building digital infrastructure. We're perfecting the infinite scrolling feeds, the sub-millisecond algorithms, the perfectly optimized notification pipeline.
Like pouring millions into AWS bills just to ensure the infrastructure never blinks.
Yeah, but we are systematically failing to intentionally architect the human identity inside of it.
Right.
We're building the city, the roads, the buildings, the neon signs, but we are completely forgetting to build a system that supports a citizen.
And that specific failure of urban planning, to use your analogy, leads us directly to the core premise of Sterling's work. He diagnoses this exact condition as the Great Stagnation.
The Great Stagnation.
Yeah. The entire industry is suffering from this massive structural failure where platforms capture attention without ever capturing identity. We celebrate sheer activity.
Right.
I mean, we optimize our entire product organizations around frequency of interaction. But what we fail to recognize, what those glowing dashboards mask from us, is that this is a terminal trajectory. We aren't building durable loyalty.
We're just renting attention.
Exactly. We are renting attention, and the brutal economic reality of a rented model is that you're forced to rebuy that attention every single morning.
Which means we're essentially operating on a hamster wheel of our own design.
Yeah.
So in this first part of our strategic analysis, we're focusing entirely on the death of rented attention and the silence risk. Let's unpack this concept of the Great Stagnation and what Sterling calls the ghost of the active but anonymous user. Because when I look at modern product strategy across the landscape, whether it's, streaming, gaming, SaaS, fitness apps, I see companies just flooding their ecosystems with features. Oh, totally. Feature creep everywhere. Right. And the objective seems completely transparent. Keep the user moving at all costs. Never let them stop to think. And you look at the telemetry in these companies, and it looks great.
Session lengths are ticking upward.
Yeah. Notifications are firing perfectly. The content pipelines are shipping flawlessly. From the outside, it looks like a living, breathing, highly profitable machine. But Sterling argues this is a complete facade. Why?
Well, it's a facade because it's based on an outdated industrial logic that we imported it from 20th century manufacturing.
Okay, how so?
The prevailing model of user acquisition and retention operates on this really simple yet fundamentally flawed formula. It's basically acquire the user at the lowest possible customer acquisition cost, ruthlessly reduce all friction in the onboarding process, increase the frequency of their visits, add an endless stream of features, and then
personalize the feed so they never hit a dead end.
Exactly. It's incredibly efficient, it's highly measurable, and it is entirely incomplete. This industrial logic assumes that human loyalty is basically a mathematical byproduct of repetition.
Right.
It assumes that if you keep a user busy enough, if you just give them enough buttons to click, enough videos to scroll, enough arbitrary tasks to complete, deep psychological attachment will just magically emerge.
Okay, but hold on. I'm going to push back on that a bit.
Yeah.
I'm going to play the hard-nosed CFO for the executives listening right now.
Go for it.
Let's look at the actual math.
If I'm looking at my quarterly metrics, And my daily active users, my DAUs, are climbing consistently. My users are maintaining their, say, 100-day logging streaks.
They are happily buying the seasonal battle passes, or they're paying the monthly subscription fee. And most importantly, they're generating massive predictable revenue. If my lifetime value is high and the machine is printing money, why should my CFO care if the user has social weight? If they're paying, why do I care if the dashboard is an illusion?
Because you're optimizing for a ghost.
A ghost.
Yeah, and the financial models you're relying on are essentially predicting the past, not the future. You are optimizing for the active but anonymous user.
Okay, define that.
This is a highly specific archetype. This is the user who, well, let's say they binge watch an entire critically acclaimed season of a show over a weekend, but their viewing history only holds value to the recommendation algorithm.
Oh, I see.
It holds zero value to a community. Or, they maintain 500-day language learning streaks out of a pure psychological fear of interruption, not out of a genuine, deeply felt sense of mastery.
Or they grind ranked ladders in a competitive game, getting really mechanically good, but remaining completely socially underdeveloped within that game's ecosystem.
Exactly.
They're just a data point moving through a tube.
That's exactly what they are. And to answer your CFO, yes, they are generating revenue today, but they are ghosts because when that engagement loop inevitably pauses, and it always pauses, right?
Right. Someone goes on vacation or a competitor launches.
Exactly. Whether due to a competitor, a shift in their personal life, or just simple fatigue, they have no standing in your ecosystem. They have no social weight. They have no identity that they would genuinely grieve losing.
Wow. No identity they would genuinely grieve losing. That phrasing right there, that is the existential threat.
Absolutely.
If they can walk away from a 5-year account and feel absolutely nothing but relief, your entire business model is built on sand.
Precisely. And Sterling doesn't just present this as, philosophical postulating. He grounds this in rigorous academic research that operations leaders really need to be paying attention to. Let's look at the 2025 study by Chang, Lee, and Yu.
Right, the digital economy study.
Yeah, they conducted an extensive analysis and demonstrated that digital goods, whether they're software features, cosmetic skins, premium access badges, they are fundamentally purchased for their social and symbolic value, not just their functional utility.
Let's drill into that for a second, because a lot of product managers assume users buy a sword in a game because it does 10% more damage, or they buy a premium sauce tier because it gives them more storage space. How do they actually prove it's about social value?
Well, Chang, Lee, and Yu proved it by isolating functional utility from social visibility. They created control groups where digital goods possess the exact same functional utility, say, a tool that saves the user 5 minutes of processing time.
Okay.
But in one group, the ownership of that tool was highly visible to peers, and in the other, it was completely private.
Oh, fascinating.
And the willingness to pay and the subsequent retention of the user just skyrocketed entirely in the socially visible group.
Wow, so the value wasn't the 5 minutes saved.
No. The value was the signal of being a professional who uses the premium tool. Furthermore, research by Huang et al. In 2026 empirically shows that digital trust, the kind of trust that keeps a user tethered to a platform during a bad product update or a server outage.
Right, the real durable trust.
Exactly. It requires group identity. It doesn't just emerge from parallel play.
Parallel play, love that term. Like toddlers in a sandbox, right?
Yeah.
Sitting next to each other, building their own castles, but never actually interacting.
Exactly. What this academic grounding proves is that sheer activity by itself does not create durable attachment. Activity only becomes durable when it's converted into socially meaningful identity. If your users are just engaging in parallel play, your DAU metric is basically a ticking time bomb.
Okay, so if time spent is just parallel play, and if activity is just a commodity that literally anyone can capture with enough ad spend, how do I, as an executive, actually measure if my users are building something durable? Because if DAUs are lying to us, what is the actual metric of loyalty? And I think this leads us perfectly into the core economic debate of this deep dive, the vital distinction between time spent and time equity.
This is where we have to fundamentally rewire how we think about user metrics. We have to move from a consumption mindset to an accumulation mindset.
Okay, break that down.
Time spent is a measure of consumption. It is effort that vanishes the absolute moment the session ends. It's a calorie burned.
Right.
Time equity, on the other hand, is a measure of accumulation. It is effort that compounds over time.
I was thinking about this while reading the manuscript, and here's an analogy that I think clarifies the stakes for anyone managing a P&L right now.
Let's hear it.
Time spent is like paying rent in a high-end luxury hotel.
Right.
You pay your money, you get a beautiful room for the night, the sheets are Egyptian cotton, you have a great experience, but the next morning you check out and you own absolutely nothing.
Right. Zero ownership.
You have no claim to the property. You have no equity. Time equity, however, is a mortgage. Every interaction, every login, every piece of effort you put in is a payment that builds equity in the property. You are actually acquiring ownership of your standing within that ecosystem.
I like that analogy. But let's build on it to understand the behavioral economics at play here. What happens when the broader market crashes? Or, to use a simpler idea, what happens when it
The
rains?
renter leaves.
Exactly. The person renting the luxury hotel room just packs up and leaves. They have zero incentive to stay and fix a leaky roof. But the person holding the mortgage, they are invested, they stay, they get on the roof and fix the leak themselves because they own a piece of the architecture.
That's a great point.
So to formally define it according to Sterling's doctrine, time equity is the portion of a user's effort that is successfully converted into durable value inside the product ecosystem. And there is a critical, uncompromising caveat here.
Right.
It only becomes equity when it is recognized by the system, when it is preserved across time, and when it is made socially or functionally consequential.
Right, because if I build a massive, incredibly complex castle in a sandbox game, but no one can ever visit it, and the server wipes the map when I log off, I mean, I spent time, I had fun, but I built zero time equity.
Exactly. You burned calories, but you built no wealth. And Sterling breaks this down into 4 specific forms of capital that time equity can take. We really need to look at these closely. The first is mastery capital.
Wait, let's pause on each of these so we aren't just listing them off. What does mastery capital actually look like in practice? Are we just talking about a progress bar here?
No, a progress bar is just telemetry. Mastery capital is when a user's effort improves their competence in a socially visible way. It's not just that they are better at the software, it's that the software reflects their fluency.
Give me an example.
Think of an expert user in a complex CAD software or a digital audio workstation. Their mastery is reflected in the customized macros they built, the efficiency of their workflow, their ability to execute tasks that novice users fundamentally cannot. The software actually molds to their competence.
Got it.
The second form is symbolic capital.
And how is that different from mastery? Are we talking about digital badges here?
Well, a badge can be part of it, but symbolic capital is when effort is translated into interpretable status. Mastery is about what you can do. Symbolic capital is about who you are recognized as.
Okay, so it's the signaling.
Yes, it's the verification checkmark. It's the legacy title from a beta test 5 years ago, or the specific aesthetic of an avatar that took hundreds of hours to unlock. It is a symbol that communicates a dense packet of information about your history to anyone who sees it.
That makes sense. And the third form?
The third form is relational capital.
That seems more straightforward. That's the network effect, right? The friends list, the followers.
Yes, but more deeply, it's when effort strengthens social standing or structural connections with others. It's the guild you lead, the mutual dependencies you've established in a B2B platform, the trust network you've curated over years. And finally, the fourth is identity capital.
Which is the holy grail.
It really is. Identity capital is when effort fundamentally shapes the user's self-concept inside the system. It's when the user no longer says, I use this product, but rather, I am a insert platform-specific noun.
I am a creator.
Yeah.
I am a top-rated seller.
Exactly. Products become strategically durable. They become monopolies of identity when they help users convert their time into more than one of these forms of capital simultaneously.
Which brings us to a really brilliant diagnostic tool that any executive can use right now, the 30-day value test.
This is crucial.
I want to address you, the listener, directly for a moment. Look at your core product, look at your most profitable vertical, and apply this test today. If your most active, most profitable user disappeared for 30 days, say, due to a vacation or an illness, what portion of their past effort would still hold value when they returned?
Such a powerful question.
Right. If the answer is none, if their algorithm has completely reset to generic recommendations, if their login streak is broken and completely unrecoverable, if their competitive rank has decayed to the absolute bottom and absolutely nobody in the system noticed their absence, you are consuming their labor.
You're extracting from them.
Exactly. You are not compounding their identity. You are running the luxury hotel, not writing the mortgage.
So true. Let's ground this high-level theory in some of the specific case studies Sterling provides, because the actual mechanics here are fascinating. He points to Marvel Snap as an incredible edge case of mechanical equity.
Oh, I love this example.
Right. For context, Marvel Snap is a highly successful, brilliantly designed digital card game. Players build immense private equity, they develop extreme archetype fluency, which is mastery capital, they understand complex interactions, strategic judgment, and they build this incredibly rich, personalized collection of cards.
Yeah.
But Sterling points out a profound historical gap in its architecture during its first couple of years. For a long time, the game focused heavily on building robust cosmetics.
Yes. Let's talk about the infinity split system, because I think it perfectly illustrates the trap of private equity.
Go ahead.
You would play for hours and hours grinding a specific card to upgrade its visual border, and eventually you'd split it to get a foil background or a different colored particle effect.
What is
It was an incredibly deep upgrade path.
It was deep, but it was structurally hollow. It built expression before it fully matured its deeper social infrastructure.
Right.
You were grinding for these gorgeous infinity splits, but the only person who truly cared about the nuance of that split was you. Your opponent saw it for maybe 3 minutes during a match, but there was no persistent social hub. You had all this private mechanical and visual equity, but you were essentially playing in a vacuum.
Your effort wasn't instantly legible to a broader community of peers who shared your specific aesthetic values.
Exactly. It wasn't until the eventual arrival of systems like alliances, where players could group together, contribute to shared goals, and display their progress, that this private equity finally began to convert into relational and identity capital.
You had a beautiful collection, but no museum to display it in.
That's a perfect way to put it. Now, contrast that architectural flaw with Roblox. Roblox is an identity-native architecture. The very structure of the platform dictates that effort acquires instant social surface area.
Break down social surface area. How does Roblox execute that mechanically?
Well, in Roblox, you aren't just clicking play on a game. You exist as an avatar in a persistent, shared physical space, even if that space is virtual. Right.
If you acquire a rare item, or you learn a complex movement mechanic, or you simply adopt a specific fashion subculture, it has immediate social surface area. Everyone around you sees it, reacts to it, and judges it. You are authoring a self that is immediately legible. Or look at Fortnite.
Oh, Fortnite is the masterclass.
Fortnite has mastered time equity not just through gameplay, but as cultural and symbolic participation.
Right. Time spent in Fortnite isn't just about shooting mechanics anymore. It compounds into event memory. I was there for the Travis Scott concert, or I have the skin from Chapter 1, Season 2.
Exactly.
You are participating in a shared symbolic universe, and your locker acts as a cryptographic ledger of your cultural participation.
That's exactly what it is. And here is the dark side of this equation. When products fail to execute this conversion, when they happily consume time spent but structurally fail to grant time equity, they don't just stagnate, they actively punish the user.
Yeah, this is brutal.
They impose what Sterling formally defines as the identity tax. The identity tax. This was the concept that made me reevaluate literally every app on my phone. What happens on day 31?
The identity tax is a brilliant conceptualization of a massive hidden cost. It is the psychological and operational cost imposed on users when a system completely fails to recognize who they are becoming.
So walk me through that.
Imagine that highly active user returning after their 30-day break. In a high identity tax system, they are greeted with total amnesia. The system basically looks at them and says, "Who are you?"
The worst feeling.
They have to reprove themselves to the algorithm. They have to rebuild their continuity from scratch. They have to reestablish their fluency just to get back to the baseline of feeling legible within the product.
It's exhausting. It's a literal punishment for taking a break, for living a human life. And it leads directly to a condition the text calls the spectator's trap.
Yes.
This is the condition where a product successfully captures repeated activity, but it completely fails to deepen identity. The user is structurally adjacent to the value, but they are never built into it. Let's go back to the marathon analogy from earlier. It's the difference between standing on the sidelines of a marathon cheering versus having a bib with your name on it and running the race yourself.
Yeah.
You are technically at the exact same event. The physical environment is identical, the crowds are the same, but the stakes are completely different.
Night and day.
The spectator can walk away at mile 13 and lose absolutely nothing. The runner is invested.
And as we said earlier, what happens when it rains during that marathon? The spectator goes home instantly. The runner with the bib, they run through the mud, they endure the friction because their identity is now tied to crossing that finish line.
That is the difference in churn.
It absolutely is. And if
Yeah.
we connect this to the bigger picture, we
Okay.
can rapidly analyze how this spectator's trap manifests across different industries. Let's look at Netflix.
Netflix is a fascinating example because it is wildly successful, yet structurally, it is a massive spectator's trap.
It is a masterclass in high-velocity consumption. The friction between curiosity and consumption is essentially zero. It autoplays the next episode before you can even reach for the remote.
Right.
But functionally, it offers absolutely zero socially legible standing. You can watch 10,000 hours of obscure European cinema on Netflix. You can have the most refined palette of any user on the platform, and you are mathematically no more meaningful to the Netflix ecosystem than a user who signed up yesterday to watch a reality dating show.
That's wild when you put it like that.
Yeah.
There's no status, no identity, just pure consumption.
None.
Or look at Duolingo. It is the global benchmark for habit formation. The daily streaks, the gamified leaderboards, it is an incredible participation engine. But Sterling argues it severely lacks deep symbolic transformation.
Because the repetition is emotionally meaningful. I mean, you genuinely do not want to lose your 300-day streak. The loss aversion is incredibly powerful. But does that streak make you socially or symbolically deep within a community of language learners?
Usually not.
Does it grant you status that others can rely on? Often, no. You are a spectator to your own metric.
And then there's Peloton. Peloton is a step up because it makes effort visible and communal. You are sweating together, you see the leaderboard. The instructor might actually call out your username for your milestone ride.
True, but the recurring architectural challenge Peloton faces is whether that visible output continues to mature into deeper symbolic standing. Yes, you get a badge for 100 rides, but does recognition deepen over the course of 3 years, or is it merely recurring?
Right? Are you gaining new authority in the community, or are you just running on a highly socialized treadmill?
Exactly. This is why executives must conduct an identity tax audit. Sterling outlines 5 specific pillars for this audit, and we really need to break them down.
Okay, let's interrogate these. Pillar 1, recognition persistence. What does that actually mean in the code, not just in theory?
Recognition persistence asks, does the product remember who the user has become over time? Does the UI adapt to reflect their veteran status? If I have been using your B2B software for 4 years, my dashboard shouldn't look identical to the one shown to a user on day 1 of their free trial. The system must acknowledge my tenure.
That's a huge failing in B2B SaaS especially. Okay, pillar 2, social legibility. We touched on this, but how do we audit it?
You audit it by asking, can other users instantly read what this person represents? If a user performs an extraordinary feat in your ecosystem, how long does it take for a stranger to understand the magnitude of that feat? If the answer is they can't, you have zero social legibility.
Pillar 3, status consequence.
Right. Does effort create meaningful differentiation? If I achieve high status, does it actually alter my permissions, my access, or the way the system treats me? Or is it just a gold star that grants no actual power?
Pillar 4, identity portability.
Can the status travel across surfaces? If I build identity on the desktop app, does it hold weight in the mobile companion app, in the community forums, in the physical live events? Identity must be contiguous.
And finally, pillar 5, community reinforcement.
Is this identity confirmed by group systems? Can other users commend, validate, or rely upon the status I have built? Because identity isn't just what I say I am, it's what the community agrees I am.
Now, if a company ignores that audit, if the C-suite looks at those 5 pillars and says, well, that sounds like a community management problem, not a product problem, and they keep imposing the identity tax, keeping their users locked in the spectator's trap, what is the ultimate consequence?
It's dire.
Because I think the default assumption is that you will see a massive backlash, a loud, fiery rebellion of angry users canceling subscriptions en masse. But it's not that, is it?
Yeah.
It brings us to the core mandate of this deep dive, the silence risk and the invisible wall.
This requires a fundamental, immediate paradigm shift in how operations leaders view churn.
Tell me about it.
We are deeply conditioned by social media to fear the vocal critics. We fear the users screaming on Reddit about a broken economy or quote tweeting a bad UI update with thousands of likes. We assume that noise equals crisis.
Naturally.
But Sterling argues that those vocal users are actually highly attached. They are practically begging you to fix the system because they care so deeply about their identity within it. They care enough to yell.
Oh, wow.
The most dangerous users to your ecosystem, the ones who actually destroy your LTV models, are the ones who silently, politely slip away. That is the silence risk.
The silent majority who just delete the app and never think about you again.
Yeah.
And they slip away because they hit what the manuscript calls the invisible wall.
Exactly. And the anatomy of the invisible wall is insidious precisely because it is completely invisible to your standard metrics telemetry. The user hits the wall, but they're still logging in. The dashboard looks completely healthy. Session length is stable.
The user isn't even bored yet. They might still objectively enjoy the core mechanical loop of your product. But the psychological contract between the user and the system has fundamentally, irrevocably changed.
Yes, and here's where the psychology gets really fascinating. Sterling points out that the invisible wall is the exact moment when aspiration collapses into maintenance.
Collapse into maintenance. Let's unpack the mechanics of that shift.
Sure. So in a healthy compounding system, early effort feels like a pure investment. You're building towards something greater: mastery of the tool, visibility in the community, unlocking a specific role or tier. Your posture is forward-leaning. You are aspirational.
Right.
But when a user hits the invisible wall, that aspirational behavior vanishes instantly. They shift into a purely defensive, contracted posture. They are no longer building a self. They are desperately maintaining a record.
They log in to protect a streak. They log in to avoid rank decay. They log in to complete an arbitrary daily obligation so they just don't fall behind.
Precisely, because they have entered what Sterling calls a zero-yield environment.
This was the light bulb moment for me reading the text. A zero-yield environment. It's the precise psychological moment a user subconsciously realizes that putting in another 100 hours of effort is going to yield the exact same social standing and identity depth as their last 10 hours.
Yep.
The equity yield curve has flattened completely to zero. They have reached the ceiling of who they can become in your world.
And how do most operations leaders react when they see growth start to slow, retention start to soften, even if they don't consciously recognize the existence of the invisible wall?
They just ship more. They hit the absolute panic button on production pipelines. More game modes, more limited time events, more seasonal battle passes, more cosmetic rewards, more discount tiers. And honestly, looking at the history of live service products, this is the default playbook.
It is.
But let me challenge this premise. Why doesn't that work? If users are hitting a wall, doesn't giving them a ladder of brand new content solve the problem? You give them a new mountain to climb.
No, because it fundamentally misdiagnoses the disease. It creates what Sterling brutally deconstructs as feature surplus.
Future surplus.
Yes, feature surplus is a false cure. It creates the illusion of momentum. You ship the new event, you see a temporary 15% spike in DAU, the dashboard glows green again, and the executive team pats themselves on the back.
High fives all around.
Exactly. But what you have actually done, mechanically, is increase consumption volume without increasing identity conversion. You are giving the user more things to do without giving them a more valuable self to become.
You are widening the treadmill. You are making the treadmill incredibly colorful. You are adding flashing lights to it, but you aren't actually letting the user move forward in space.
Let's look at Pokemon Go, which the text mentions briefly, but is really worth expanding on. It is unparalleled at mass participation and driving physical human gathering. It literally moves millions of human bodies through physical cities. That is a staggering achievement. But it faces this persistent doctrinal challenge. Does a long-term progression in the game deepen your identity at the same rate as your participation? Does the system recognize you differently? Or does catching your 1,000th Pidgey feel functionally and socially identical to catching your 100th?
If the yield is flat, shipping 50 new Pokemon to catch is just feature surplus.
Exactly.
Okay, this raises the million-dollar question. If feature surplus is a false cure and we cannot simply outship our way out of the Great Stagnation, how do executives actually engineer a way over this invisible wall? How do we build the citizen, not just the scaffolding?
They need an architecture of ascent. And that brings us to the absolute centerpiece of Sterling's doctrine, the framework that gives the book its title, the Affinity Ladder.
I want to be incredibly precise about this because as I was reading it, I initially fell into a trap, and I know our listeners might too. It is so easy to misinterpret.
Oh, very easy.
The Affinity Ladder, which consists of the Spectator, the Participant, the Champion, and the Evangelist, is not a marketing funnel.
Yeah.
It is not a user acquisition pipeline where you pour 10,000 leads in the top and hope 100 squeeze out the bottom. It is a structural theory of identity ascent within a product's architecture.
That distinction is vital. A marketing funnel moves people towards a transaction. The affinity ladder moves people towards a transformation.
Let's analyze these rungs meticulously, starting at the bottom. The spectators.
Right, they are present in your ecosystem, but they are not invested. They are looking around. What they fundamentally need from your product architecture at this stage is clarity and directional possibility. They need to be able to look up the ladder and instantly see what kind of person becomes meaningful in this world.
They need to see the heroes of the ecosystem. Then, if they convert, they move to the next rung. The participants. This is where the vast majority of standard DAUs live, right? The street keepers, the daily logins.
Exactly. Participation is the proving ground.
Yeah.
And the core architectural need of a participant is not just more content to consume. They need systematic proof that their effort is starting to matter. They need early indicators of time equity. But here is where the model gets truly profound. The most vital transition on the entire ladder, the critical hinge that dictates whether a product survives a decade or dies in a year, is the movement from participant to champion.
Let's camp out here for a second, because understanding the mechanics of this specific transition completely blew my mind. A participant only becomes a champion when their effort stops being purely accumulative, meaning they stop just hoarding points or items or private metrics, and becomes publicly interpretable.
That is the threshold of social meaning. You are no longer just active in a vacuum. Your competence, your history, or your specific contribution has become legible enough to actually matter to other people. Your identity has surface area.
Yes.
And once you cross that threshold, you are on the path to the ultimate goal, the top of the ladder, the evangelist. Now, an evangelist doesn't just recommend your product because you gave them a $10 referral code.
Right, they aren't an affiliate marketer.
No, they reveal themselves through your product. Their identity, their professional or social standing, is so deeply intertwined with your ecosystem that advocacy is a natural, unavoidable byproduct of their very existence. They become a self-propelling growth engine because to promote themselves is to promote your platform.
But to get them there, to move them from participant to champion, I have to challenge a piece of prevailing UX dogma that has dominated Silicon Valley for 20 years.
Oh, the friction debate.
Yes, every product designer, every front-end architect listening to this right now has been beaten over the head with the concept of frictionless design. We are taught in every boot camp and executive seminar to obsess over reducing friction at all costs. One-click checkout, infinite scrolls, seamless onboarding, invisible UI.
Right.
But Sterling is actually arguing the exact opposite here when it comes to status ascent, isn't he? Are we throwing out 20 years of UX philosophy?
We aren't throwing it out. We are applying it correctly. Sterling introduces the concept of meaningful friction, and it is a profound insight. Look, ease of use and frictionless design are absolutely crucial at the bottom of the ladder. Ease attracts entry for spectators. You want the door to be wide open.
Makes sense.
But if you want to create champions, you need meaningful friction. Why? Because friction protects distinction. If acquiring high status or a rare badge or a leadership role in your product is completely frictionless and automated, then that status instantly collapses into empty decoration. It means nothing.
It's worthless.
Meaningful status requires genuine effort, it requires discernment, and it requires selective gates that preserve the legibility and prestige of that status.
Because if everybody's a VIP, nobody's a VIP. If everyone gets the gold medal just for logging in 30 days in a row, the gold medal is worthless.
Exactly. Friction generates the heat that forges identity. And this isn't just about making users feel a sense of pride. Let's tie this directly back to the executive financials, to the actual P&L.
Always comes back to the math.
Sterling defines the math behind this as the affinity premium. This is the financial shadow cast by successful identity architecture. The affinity premium is calculated quite simply. Your identity-based retention rate minus your activity-based retention rate.
Let me make sure I have that math right. It's the baseline retention of the users who stay because they genuinely belong, minus the baseline retention of the users who stay just because you sent them a highly optimized push notification at 8:00 a.m.
Precisely. And what the data shows is that identity-bearing users, the champions and evangelists, are mathematically far more durable. They are more economically efficient because they require drastically less paid reacquisition.
Wow.
Activity-driven retention is a drug. It must constantly be re-stimulated with expensive performance marketing, discounts, and massive content drops. Identity-driven retention is a self-reinforcing flywheel. The affinity premium is the ultimate measure of your product's structural health.
Okay, the theory is airtight. The math makes sense to the CFO. So the obvious, intensely practical question is, how do we actually build these rungs? How do we purposefully inject this meaningful friction and capture this affinity premium?
Right, the execution.
This brings us to the execution phase, engineering affinity and status governance. And Sterling hits us with a blunt, undeniable truth right out of the gate, one that ruins a lot of product roadmaps. You cannot build a belonging feature.
You cannot execute belonging as a JRA ticket. Belonging is an emergent outcome of correct architecture. You can't just slap a global chat box in your app, add a friends list, and tell your board, there, we shipped community, users will now feel like they belong.
Doesn't work that way.
No. Sterling provides a very precise sociological formula for this. Identity, which answers the internal question, who am I here, plus status, which answers the external question, who am I to others here? Oro equals belonging, which results in the profound feeling of, I am located.
I love that specific phrasing. I am located. It's a spatial relationship to the digital environment. You have coordinates. But to achieve those coordinates, we have to execute status engineering. And this requires us to cleanly differentiate between cosmetics and status, which is where 90% of products fail.
Absolutely. A cosmetic is purely visual. It's a shiny new skin for your character, a dark mode for your UI, or a color change for your profile picture. It looks nice, but it carries no inherent meaning. Status, however, is interpretable.
Interpretable.
Yes.
Hmm.
Status requires a shared social logic, a consensus that teaches the entire community what that specific signal means and why it demands respect or attention.
Discord is the absolute perfect case study for this, and we need to unpack exactly how they do it. Discord achieves massive, robust social legibility without having a traditional gameplay loop. It's fundamentally a communication utility, but through its highly customizable roles, its server identities, and its specific badge hierarchy, it teaches users exactly what signals matter.
Let's look at the mechanism. When you enter a new Discord server, and you see someone typing in the chat with a specific, highly distinct colored name accompanied by a moderator or top contributor badge, that color changes your behavior instantly.
Instantly. You don't mess with the red text.
Right. You instantly know how to interpret their standing. Their words carry structural weight. The color isn't just a cosmetic choice. It is a cryptographic signature of their time equity in that specific community.
And we can see this status engineering work beautifully in niche or mid-market products too. It's not just for gaming or massive social networks. Let's talk about Strava.
Strava is a phenomenal example. Strava doesn't have the broad scale of a global platform like Instagram, but its status engineering is practically flawless. They utilize features like local legends or highly competitive segment leaderboards.
What are the mechanics there?
They take deeply private, isolated physical effort. You running up a miserable, steep hill in your local neighborhood alone at 6:00 a.m., and they turn it into highly visible, highly contested public meaning. It literally converts private sweat into public status.
But status engineering is incredibly dangerous. It is playing with fire. If you get the tuning wrong, you don't just fail to create belonging, you actively create a toxic, hostile wasteland that accelerates churn.
Oh, yes.
Sterling outlines the risks, so let's run through a rapid-fire risk assessment of broken status systems. First up, status inflation.
Status inflation occurs when the operations team panics about engagement and decides to hand out too many signals too easily to make users feel good. If you give everyone a top fan badge just for liking one post, the status instantly loses all semantic meaning.
It becomes visual background noise.
Exactly, and your actual champions feel betrayed because their hard-earned distinction was just commoditized.
Next risk, gatekeeping and toxic enforcement.
This is the opposite problem. This happens when high-status users, your entrenched evangelists, define legitimacy too narrowly. They use their standing and their tools not to welcome and mentor new participants, but to harass them, exclude them, and establish an oligarchy, turning the broader ecosystem incredibly hostile to new acquisition.
And finally, status decay.
This is an architectural rot. It happens when a hierarchy hardens into immunity because standing is never forced to be refreshed. Someone reached the top of the leaderboard or gained a moderator role 5 years ago, they haven't contributed a single piece of value since, but they still hold all the visual power and authority.
Status rots.
And new participants realize they can never climb the ladder because the top ranks are occupied by ghosts.
Managing these complex sociological risks is not a job you hand off to a junior community manager on a Friday afternoon. This is a core C-level governance mandate. If your status system breaks, your retention breaks. Period.
Which brings us to the ultimate executive mandate for the leaders listening to this deep dive today. You must fundamentally shift your paradigm and stop confusing functional churn with affinity churn.
Let's draw that line clearly. Functional churn is natural. A user signed up for your software to solve a specific problem. They achieved their goal. The life cycle is complete, and they leave. That is fine. You provided value.
Exactly. But affinity churn is a catastrophic structural failure. Affinity churn means a user is exiting your ecosystem despite still needing the service because your identity architecture completely failed to recognize, preserve, and compound who they were becoming. You treated a citizen like a piece of scaffolding.
So practically, what do you do on Monday morning when you get back to the office? Sterling outlines a 6-month operating roadmap, and it is ruthlessly pragmatic. Month 1. You run the Affinity 360 diagnostic, you establish your baseline metrics across the identity tags, and you quantify your spectator risk. Are you running a marathon or a stadium? Month 2. You identify the single highest friction rung on your Affinity Ladder. Where exactly are your participants failing to become champions? And you assign direct executive ownership to fix that specific bottleneck.
Accountability is key there.
Month 3. You redesign one core recognition system to dramatically improve social legibility. Month 4. You pilot a new contribution pathway that requires meaningful friction. Month 5. You measure the affinity premium. Are these newly recognized users actually more durable?
It is an aggressive roadmap, but it is precisely designed to transform a company from a factory that simply produces activity into an architect that builds identity.
I want to leave you with a final, highly strategic thought to ponder, something that builds on everything we've analyzed today, but pushes it into the immediate future.
Yeah.
Look at your product roadmap for the next quarter. Really look at it. We have spent this entire hour talking about human users. But what happens to your affinity ladder when 50% of the participants generating activity in your ecosystem over the next 3 years are actually autonomous AI agents? If your status engineering and your identity architecture cannot differentiate between genuine human effort and frictionless AI automation, your entire status hierarchy collapses instantly. The gold medals will all be won by algorithms. How are you engineering your meaningful friction to survive the age of autonomous agents?
That is the architectural challenge of the next decade. If you fail to solve it, you will have a perfectly optimized city populated entirely by ghosts.
This has been the first part of our strategic analysis, the Momentum Engine. We will see you in our next deep dive.